Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why in how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio, and today I want to touch on a very touchy subject that we often don't touch on, and that is time. What is the value of your time? Now think about that for a moment. What is the value of your time? How much is your time worth? Think of a number right now in your head. And then if I asked you, could you justify that number? Or asked you, how did you arrive at that number? Could you do it? Could you do it? Now, what I want to talk about today is what is your time worth, but I want to calculate what the minimum time is worth of your time. Because too often in selling, we have people, clients, who waste our time. We have people who are never going to buy from us, who always want to meet with us, for example, and clients who want to get together but simply know they're not going to buy. So what is our time worth? Well, I want to walk you through this little mathematical example. So if you're listening to this, when you get back to your office or home, get a pencil and paper out and really walk through this. And if you're in front of your desk right now, break out that pen and paper. Now, let's pretend for a moment. Let's do a hypothetical. Let's say that you want to make $100,000 a year. Just a random number. You can choose any number you want, but work with me on the math on this one. Let's say that you want to make $100,000. That's your goal for the year. You want to make $100,000. Now, let's look at the number of working days in a year. There's obviously 365 days in a year without leap year. 365, but only 260 are actual working days. You take out vacations, weekends, and all that stuff. Really, there's only 260 working days. So if I take 100,000 divided by 260 working days, that means I need to make $385 per day in order to hit my goal of 100,000. So all I did was take 100,000 divided by 260 working days in a year to arrive at 385. Now, let's look at what I need to make per day, 385, and divide that by a typical working day of 8 hours. If I divide 385 by 8, I arrive at $48 an hour. Let's just call it $50 an hour, which means if you want to make $100,000, your time is worth $50 an hour. So let's walk through this exercise. When someone calls you up and says, hey, I'd like to take you out to lunch, we feel good about that because they're going to pick up the bill and we'll get together, we'll have great conversations. But now, let's think about what is the real cost of going to lunch? Well, if you live here in Atlanta, Georgia, where I live, just to get anywhere is going to be at least a half hour. And I'm being conservative, half an hour. So to get to the restaurant where we're going to meet for lunch is a half hour. To drive back to my office or home, it's going to be another half hour. So that's guaranteed an hour spent. But if we have lunch and it lasts an hour to maybe 2 hours, then the total time invested is going to be somewhere between 2 hours and 3 hours total, which means that lunch has cost me, in terms of my time value, between 100 and 150. Again, if it's 2 hours times 50 is 100. If it goes 3 hours total with driving time, that's $150. So that means every time I go out to lunch with somebody, even if they pay the bill, it's costing you, in terms of time, between $100 and $150. How about this one? You ever hear somebody say, hey, let me buy you a cup of coffee? And you're like, sure, let's go for a cup of coffee. But again, it'll take you a half hour to get there, maybe a half hour to get back, and then maybe you'll chat for about an hour. That means you spent 2 hours. 2 hours times $50, that cup of coffee is costing you $100, even though you didn't pay for it. And I want you to start thinking about this because your time as a salesperson is valuable. How about this? A client wants you to fly out and see them. You can drive, but let's say you fly out to see a customer. Well, let's say you go out day 1, but you come back day 2, make it a quick trip. Well, let's look at the numbers. If I take 2 days to go see this customer, easily that's 16 hours. I'm not even talking about the travel time to the airport, back from the airport, the delays, waiting at the airport. We're just talking 2 8-hour days, right? 16 hours total. Well, if I take 16 times $50, well, that's $800 just to go see a customer. Again, this is, not even counting expenses. That's already costing me $800 just to go see that customer, less expenses. And then when you add in the driving and all that, this could be at least 20 hours that you're going to invest to go see this customer. 20 hours at $50, that's $1,000 less expenses that you're spending on that client. Now, I really want to emphasize this one because if you're flying out to see a customer and you know that it's costing you $1,000 of your time, that's 16 hours, 2 8-hour days, times 50. It's costing you $1,000, and I'm not even adding the expenses. So let's say if I threw in expenses, it would be another $1,000. So that trip, that face-to-face meeting is costing me $2,000. Now, if it's costing me $2,000, or in this case, costing you $2,000, I say that you have earned the right to ask for the order. You have earned the right to advance the sale, move to the next level. In other words, if you're going to fly out there and spend $2,000 of your money and your time, then you need some form of commitment. And I want you to start thinking about it this way. When somebody says, let's get together and discuss business because they think they might want to buy your product, keep in mind that you're spending $100 to $150 just to go have lunch with that person. So that's costing you money. Now, it gets worse if you really look at the numbers. These are just basic numbers, but if you really dig into the numbers, let's assume that you want to make $100,000 per year, but that's $100,000 that you want to make net in your pocket so you can cover your expenses. Well, guess what? There's something called taxes. So let's say that your effective tax rate is 25%. Right? So your $100,000 is going to get taxed at 25%, which means you're not really making $100,000. In order to make a true $100,000 after taxes, you'd probably have to make about $133,000. $133,000. So if you take $100,000 divided by 75%, which is again, you're paying an effective tax rate of 25%, you're going to have to make $133,000, which means your hourly rate went from $50 to now $65 if you want to really make $100,000. Which means that 3-hour lunch just went from 100 to 150 to 195 to 300, right? That 2-hour coffee break just went from a simple $100 to 130. In other words, time is money. Your time is valuable. This is costing you money. When you sit down with somebody, it is costing you money. And I want you to start thinking this way because if you start seeing yourself as using time and time is money, then guess what? You're going to have a sense of urgency. You're going to want to sell more aggressively. You're going to want to push a little harder. You're not going to want to hold back because you know what? You're wasting your money. Think about it this way. If you went out to lunch with somebody, it's almost like grabbing a $100 bill or a $150 bill and basically, squashing it up, just smashing it down and throwing it in the garbage, right? Just crumpling it up and throwing it in the garbage. If somebody invites you for a cup of coffee and you spend 2 hours and you didn't talk business and you didn't move the sale forward, close it or advanced it, then that's like taking a $100 bill, crumpling it up and throw it in the garbage. Start thinking this way. Your time is valuable, but it gets worse. The fact that you spend 2 to 3 hours with a customer who didn't buy because you didn't ask for the order because you didn't think you earned the right when you did, because you didn't close that deal, those 2 to 3 hours you spent on that customer also cost you what is known as an opportunity cost. An opportunity cost is what you missed out on by going to lunch with that person. In other words, if I had spent it on another customer who was more qualified, I probably could have closed that deal. So if you go to lunch, you go to coffee, you don't close the deal, you don't advance the sale, not only are you losing that deal in front of you, but the fact that you wasted that time on somebody who didn't deserve your time, the opportunity cost that you've lost is adding up in the background. So again, start thinking about this. Now, you can look at your hourly rate and say, $65, $150 an hour, whatever it may be. You pick your number because I just gave you a time-based number. But sometimes you're an expert in your field and you have value, real value. So maybe it isn't $50 an hour. Maybe it's $150. Maybe it's $250 an hour. Whatever that number is for you, keep it in mind next time you're sitting in front of a client and say to yourself, by taking this meeting, I am now investing 2 to 3 hours, and what is that worth to me? And when you start thinking this way, you will create your own sense of urgency to not only qualify people you meet with, but also to try to close a deal right there and then. And that's it for the Sales Influence Podcast. Don't forget to leave me some feedback on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. I've been getting a lot of feedback from you guys, and I really do appreciate it. Keep it coming, and I hope you find this information valuable. I'm trying to give you new perspectives on how to view selling so you can sell more in the long run. Also, check out my sales training website. You know the deal, seminarsonselling.com. Let me say it again, seminarsonselling.com, where you'll find great training videos for you and your team to help you grow your business. Look, you are your best investment. If you're not investing in yourself, then you're hurting yourself. Lastly, I want to thank you for listening. This is Victor Antonio, always reminding you, selling ain't hard when you know how. Take care. Hi, I'm Victor Antonio. I'm an author, sales trainer, and keynote speaker. I'm often asked, what makes a great speaker? Is it someone who delivers real content that the audience can use? Is it someone who engages the audience so they're part of the learning experience? Or is it someone who can motivate an audience to push them beyond their comfort zone and discover new abilities? The answer is yes. But the most important thing to remember is that I'm not there to look good. I'm there to make my client look good. Simply put, it's never about me, and it's always about them.